That night, Robin Williams didn't tell a joke. He shared his father's last words, and no one was ready. The microphone stood silent. The audience, who had come expecting laughter, sat frozen in their seats. Robin's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the stool beneath him. His eyes, usually sparkling with mischief and wit, were different now, raw, vulnerable, glistening with something deeper than comedy could ever reach. For a man who had spent his entire life making people laugh, this moment was different. This wasn't performance. This was truth. And what happened next would reveal the heart of a man the world thought they knew, but had never truly seen. But before we understand that moment, we need to go back. Back to where it all began. If you want to know how this moment changed everything Robin Williams ever did on stage, subscribe now because the most powerful part of his story is still ahead. Robin Williams was born into a world of silence. His father, Robert Fitzgerald Williams, was a senior executive at Ford Motor Company, a man of few words, strict discipline, and emotional distance. In the Williams household, affection wasn't spoken. It was assumed. Love was provided through stability, not through warmth. Young Robin grew up in a sprawling mansion in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. But the size of the house couldn't fill the emptiness he felt. His father worked long hours. His mother, a former model, was often away. Robin spent most of his childhood alone, creating characters and voices in his head just to have someone to talk to. Comedy became his language. If he couldn't get his father's attention through silence, maybe he could earn it through laughter. But his father rarely laughed. Years passed. Robin left home, pursued acting, found his voice on stage. He became Mork, the alien who didn't understand Earth. Ironically, that's exactly how Robin had felt his entire childhood, like an outsider trying to decode human connection. Fame came fast. The world fell in love with his energy, his improvisation, his ability to shapeshift into anyone and anything. But behind the chaos of characters, there was still a boy waiting for his father to say, "I'm proud of you." That validation never came. Not in words. And then, one day, the phone call came that would change everything. Robert Williams had suffered a heart attack. By the time Robin reached the hospital, it was too late. His father was in his final hours, barely conscious, his body frail and failing. Robin sat beside the bed, holding his father's hand, a hand that had never held his as a child. The machines beeped steadily. Nurses moved quietly in the background. The room smelled of antiseptic and unspoken goodbyes. Robin didn't know what to say. He had spent decades performing in front of millions, but in this moment, words failed him. All the voices, all the characters, all the comedy, none of it mattered here. And then his father opened his eyes. Just barely. His lips moved, struggling to form words. Robin leaned in closer. "You made me laugh," his father whispered. 3 words. That's all it took. 3 words that Robin had waited his entire life to hear. His father's eyes closed. The heart monitor's beeping slowed, then stopped. Robert Fitzgerald Williams was gone. Robin sat there, holding his father's hand, tears streaming down his face. He had spent a lifetime making the world laugh, but in that moment, all he had wanted was to make one man smile. And in the last seconds of his father's life, he finally knew he had. But that knowledge came with a weight Robin would carry for the rest of his life. That night, months later, Robin walked onto a stage in San Francisco for what was supposed to be a regular stand-up set. The venue was packed. People came to escape their own lives, to forget their troubles, to laugh until their sides hurt. That's what Robin Williams did. He made people forget. But that night, Robin couldn't forget. He walked on stage to thunderous applause. The lights were bright, the crowd was electric. He grabbed the microphone, opened his mouth to deliver his first joke, and then he stopped. The audience waited, smiling, expecting the punchline. But Robin just stood there, staring into the crowd. His face, usually animated and wild, was still. Unnaturally still. Seconds passed. The applause faded. Confusion rippled through the audience. Robin took a breath, then spoke. My father died 3 months ago. The room went silent. People shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't what they came for. They came for Mork. They came for Mrs. Doubtfire. They came for laughter. But Robin wasn't giving them that. Not tonight. He was a hard man to know. Robin continued, his voice soft but steady. He didn't say much. And I spent my whole life trying to get him to laugh. Every joke, every character, every performance, somewhere in the back of my mind, I was still that kid trying to make his father smile. He paused, his hand gripping the microphone tighter. And you know what's crazy? I did it for 40 years. 40 years on stages, on screens, in front of millions of people. And I never knew if it worked. I never knew if he was proud. I never knew if he even cared. His voice cracked slightly. The audience was no longer confused. They were rivaled. Some wiped their eyes. Others sat frozen, afraid to move, afraid to break the moment. Robin looked down at the stage, then back up. But right before he died, he looked at me. And he said 3 words. Just 3. You made me laugh. The silence in the room was absolute. That's all I ever wanted, Robin whispered. That's all any of us want, isn't it? To know that we mattered to someone. That we weren't invisible. He smiled then, not the manic, wild grin people knew from movies. This was different. Smaller. Real. So tonight, I'm not here to make you forget your lives. I'm here to remind you, tell the people you love that they matter. Don't wait. Don't assume they know. Because one day, you'll run out of time. The audience sat in stunned silence. And then, slowly, one person stood. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire theater was on their feet, not applauding, but standing in respect. Some were crying openly. Others just nodded, understanding something they hadn't understood before. Robin didn't bow. He didn't wave. He just nodded back, set the microphone down, and walked off stage. Backstage, Robin sat alone in his dressing room. A stagehand knocked gently. Mr. Williams? There are people who want to meet you. Robin shook his head. Not tonight. But then a voice came from the doorway. Mr. Williams? Robin looked up. It was a young man, maybe in his early 20s, eyes red from crying. I needed to say thank you, the young man said. My dad and I haven't spoken in 2 years. After hearing you tonight, I'm going to call him. Right now. Robin stood, walked over, and shook his hand. Good, he said quietly. Don't wait. The young man nodded and left. Robin sat back down, staring at his reflection in the mirror. That night, he didn't perform comedy. He performed something far more powerful. He performed truth. And in doing so, he gave his audience something they would carry with them forever. If this story moved you, share it. Subscribe and leave a comment, because stories like this deserve to be remembered. In the years that followed, Robin never spoke publicly about that night again. But something had fundamentally shifted inside him. Friends noticed it first. The manic energy was still there, the improvisation, the genius, but now there were pauses. Moments where Robin would stop mid-sentence during interviews, his eyes distant, as if remembering something only he could see. In one particular interview years later, a journalist asked him about his creative process. Robin started to answer with his usual rapid-fire wit, jumping from character to character, voice to voice. Then he stopped. The room grew quiet. You know what's funny? Robin said, his voice softer now. I spent decades performing, creating characters, being anyone but myself. And the moment that mattered most in my life wasn't when I was performing at all. It was when I stopped. When I just was. The journalist didn't interrupt. The cameras kept rolling. My father taught me something without meaning to, Robin continued. He taught me that the most important conversations we have aren't the ones where we're trying to impress anyone. They're the ones where we're just present. Just honest. Just human. He smiled then, that same small, real smile from that night on stage. So if there's anything I want people to take from my work, it's not just the laughter. It's the reminder that behind every performance there's a person. And that person just wants to be seen. Really seen. The interview clip would later go viral, shared by millions who recognized something in Robin's words, a truth they had felt but never articulated. The comments were filled with stories, people calling estranged parents, writing letters to old friends, saying the things they had been too afraid to say. Robin had done it again. Not through comedy this time, but through vulnerability. There was one more moment that few people know about. A year after that stage performance, Robin received a letter. It was handwritten, the paper worn and creased as if it had been carried for a long time. The return address was from a hospice center in Oregon. Robin opened it backstage before a show. Inside was a note from a nurse. "Mr. Williams, I'm writing on behalf of a patient who watched your performance in San Francisco. He was there that night. He's dying now, and he asked me to tell you something. After your show, he went home and called his son for the first time in 15 years. They reconciled. They had 3 more years together before his illness. He wanted you to know that your words saved his relationship. And in his final days, he has no regrets. Thank you for giving him that gift." Robin stood there, holding the letter, tears streaming down his face. A stagehand saw him and asked if he was okay. "Yeah," Robin said, folding the letter carefully and putting it in his pocket. "Yeah, I'm okay." That night he performed. He made the audience laugh until they couldn't breathe. But before he left the stage, he did something he rarely did. He spoke directly to them, no characters, no voices, just Robin. "Tell someone you love them tonight," he said. "Don't wait for the perfect moment. Just say it. Because perfect moments don't exist. Only real ones do." The audience applauded, not knowing why those words meant so much, not knowing about the letter in his pocket or the father in the hospital room or the young man backstage years ago. But Robin knew. And that was enough. There's something profound about the relationship between fathers and sons. It's rarely simple. Rarely clear. It exists in the spaces between words, in glances across dinner tables, in silences that stretch for years. Robin understood this better than most. His comedy was loud, chaotic, explosive, but it was born from quiet. From a childhood spent trying to fill the silence his father left behind. In his later years, Robin would sometimes talk about his father in interviews, though never directly about that final moment. He'd describe him as a good man and a product of his time. He'd say things like, "He showed love through providing, not through saying." And you could hear it in Robin's voice. Not anger, not resentment, but understanding. A son finally seeing his father not as a mythic figure, but as a human being with his own limitations, his own fears, his own way of loving. That's the thing about grief. It doesn't just take. It also reveals. Robin's father's death didn't just leave a hole, it filled in spaces Robin hadn't understood before. It gave context to a lifetime of silence. And in those 3 final words, it gave Robin something he never had, closure. But closure isn't the same as peace. Peace is something you build. And Robin built it the only way he knew how, by giving others what his father had given him too late. By telling people, again and again, in 1,000 different ways, you matter. Your story matters. Don't wait to say what needs to be said. Every performance after that night carried a weight. Not a burden but a purpose. Robin wasn't just entertaining anymore. He was witnessing. He was saying, "I see you. You're not invisible. Your pain is real. Your joy is real. And both deserve to be honored." In one of his final interviews, Robin was asked what he hoped his legacy would be. He didn't mention the awards or the movies or the accolades. He said simply, "I hope people remember that it's okay to feel. That vulnerability isn't weakness. That the bravest thing you can do is be honest about who you are." Those words weren't just about comedy. They were about life. About fatherhood. About the 3 words he'd waited decades to hear, and the millions of words he'd spent trying to give that same gift to others. But people who were there never forgot. They told their friends. They told their families. The story spread, not through headlines, but through quiet conversations, whispered memories, and hearts that had been touched. Robin continued his career. He made people laugh in movies, on stages, in interviews. But those who knew him closely said something had changed after his father's death. His comedy was still brilliant, still electric, but there was a weight to it now. A depth. He understood something most comedians never learn, that laughter and pain aren't opposites. They're partners. You can't truly make someone laugh unless you understand what makes them cry. Robin's father never got to see the man his son became. He never saw the awards, the acclaim, the impact Robin would have on millions of lives. But in those final 3 words, "You made me laugh," he gave his son something far more valuable than pride. He gave him peace. And that peace allowed Robin to do what he did best, not just make people laugh, but make them feel. Make them remember. Make them human. Because at the end of the day, that's what we all want. Not to be famous. Not to be perfect. Just to know that we mattered. That someone saw us. That we weren't invisible. Robin Williams spent his life making sure no one ever felt invisible. And that night on stage, when he stopped performing and started sharing, he reminded us all of the most important thing. Love isn't something you assume. It's something you say. Out loud. Before it's too late. Subscribe and share this story so it will never be forgotten. Because the world needs to remember what Robin taught us, that behind every joke, there's a human heart. And that heart deserves to be heard.